I mean, not that we're employees. I know, right? Exactly. So I can really
Would be a cute touch.
So you kind of sit down, sending it to the doctor. What do you have?
Can you guys see this?
So I'm going to sit down.
So the book that we read was called Negotiating Critical Literacies with Young Children, written by Maria Paula. She is a teacher, my statistics from just outside of Toronto, where I'm from. Anyway, so basically, I pulled up this quote from her introduction that really kind of summarizes her whole philosophy of critical literacy, which is a critical literacy curriculum needs to be lived. So really, what she does in her classroom is she uses her kids' experiences and what they bring to the table, what they bring to their conversations to inspire the curriculum that she kind of develops for them. But really, they develop it for themselves by thinking about, she just kind of facilitates the way that they think about the issues that come up. So she addresses equity and social justice issues using the everyday text from their lives. So all kinds of experiences that they come across at home, through the books that they read at school, through the experiences they encounter at school, and we'll show some specific examples a little bit later in the presentation. One of the ways that she helps the kids come to an understanding of all these experiences is through a visual articulation that she uses called an audit trail. So what that is when they come to different ideas that they're interested in, she helps them visualize it by, for example, posting pictures of the things that they're doing in class. In this picture here, she started this picture of this portion of the audit trail. On the first day of school, they read this book. You can't really see it, but she posted the cover of it. They read this book about froth, and that led them into a whole discussion about rainforests, which eventually ended up in a discussion about endangered species and all of that kind of stuff. So she helped them visualize their learning by posting different important artifacts from their learning experiences on the wall. Different quotes that kids have said, just kind of to visualize the journey of their learning. And she keeps up all of their things that they posted throughout the year so that they can refer back to it and make connections from one experience to another.
So my chapter that I'm focusing on is called The French Cafe. In her preschool classroom, she focused on listening to their needs and what they were interested in, but also what they were interested in debating. And so the school was having a French Cafe, and the pre-kindergarten was left out. They were not invited. Kindergarten through, I think the rest of the school, up to like 8th grade, got to go. And the morning she came in, and her kids were in an uproar that that they were uninvited. So instead of just continuing on with her day and being like, you'll get to go next year, she listened to what they were doing and said, how could we change this? How could we go about, how could we make our voices heard? And they started running from to all the other pre-kindergarten classes and taking a vote of who would want to go, and figuring out which classes got to go and didn't. Instead of first saying, well, in kindergarten, everybody else gets to go, they did a survey and they figured it out, and then they came up with ideas on how they could convince administrators that they should be welcome to go. And they ended up making a petition that they all signed and submitted it, and in the end, they ended up changing it, and they were invited the next year to be able to go. So she listened to what they were upset about and gave them support in finding a way to change what they thought was unfair, and a way to help them do that.
So my chapter was, we know how McDonald's thinks. So the kids basically, they were talking about McDonald's Happy Meals, and it kind of came into gender, like I was working on in this class. And the kids were like, well, why do the boys get Hot Wheels? Maybe a girl wants Hot Wheels. And then they were discussing that McDonald's knows how to pull in consumers, specifically children, because they know that if they put a toy inside the Happy Meal, that they're gonna bring the kids. And without there being Happy Meals in the toys, they're not gonna go to McDonald's. That's what they were saying. We're not gonna go to McDonald's if we're not gonna get toys. And then the kids said that McDonald's has a strategy. The more that they put the toys in Happy Meals, the more we're gonna go. And then they were arguing with each other, like, well, would you go to McDonald's with this toy, and so forth, things like that. And then the kids started talking about the wrappers that the toys came in, the plastic wrappers, and they were discussing, because the wrappers say dangerous for children, don't put it around children. So the kids are like, wait, why are kids' toys in Happy Meals placed inside plastic wrappers if it's so dangerous? So as a class, they were like, well, we don't want to deal with something dangerous inside of a wrapping of a toy, so let's create our own. So as a class, the kids created their own boxes that were safe for children, and then they put their toys in and so forth.
The last example that we're going to tell you about is about the song Baby Beluga, the Rocky song. You probably know it. So they learned the song at the beginning of the year, and then later in the year, one of the kids read an article with their parents in the newspaper about how the whales were being endangered by pollution and how they were dying off. So she used this to kind of to deconstruct the song and to deconstruct the article in a way. And then the kids ended up crafting their own version of the song that kind of that represented more the bigger picture of what was really happening to the belugas, and that they weren't maybe so happy in the deep blue sea. And then this kind of inspired the kids to raise money to donate to the World Wildlife Fund using a store that they already had in their classroom. They had built this snack store where they would pay like 10 cents a day for lunch or snack. So they decided that they would call it the Save the Whale store, I think. And then all the money that they collected was given to the World Wildlife Fund.
So I teach pre-K, so we thought it would be interesting to take this approach and see how it could be applied in my classroom. And we've talked about this before, that gender's kind of been a hot button issue in my own classroom. And just kind of listening to their discussions and seeing what we could pick out of it. So my classroom is of 4-year-olds. A couple of them are still 3, but everybody's pretty much 4. I'm at a Catholic school, and it's middle to upper class families, and I have 14 girls and 8 boys, which I think is sparking a lot of the gender discussion. And we've been talking about it online and things like that, so I've just been keeping my ear out for some of their discussion to just kind of catch it, and instead of saying, well, you know, it doesn't matter, we can get online, it doesn't have to be a boy line or a girl line, it doesn't matter. Kind of discussing it with them and seeing what they really had to say and what their thoughts were behind it. Okay, so I was reading My New Friend Is So Fun by Mo Willems. And one of my students, Ryan, raised his hand and said, do you think Piggy's new friend is a girl like her? And one of the girls in my class thumbed down his throat and said, Piggy's not a girl, he's a boy. And that's not true. What, you can read it. We're going to have it actually here. We want you to take one, and you guys can read it. And what we want you to do is focus on the questions with your group and see maybe how you would initially handle this without, I don't know, our chapters and what we know about listening in and what we've learned a lot about in this class, about listening and taking in what they say, instead of shutting it down and making it be like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't say, they don't say if Piggy's a boy or a girl, but kind of how you could pull it out and expand on it and validate their points. So when you get the sheet, you can read it through, and we'll give you a few minutes to talk it over.
Just look at the front vignette.
Is it in the different?
Oh, it's just what they.
Oh, I didn't change it. I tried to change your name. Oh, I apologize. Never mind. I just tried to change the name and I fixed it.
You can even jot down some notes on the space if you feel like you want to.
Yeah,
Just begin.
Yeah.
And as you look at it, just think of these questions, and you just have to discuss them with your group members. What do you think about it?
So, I think the question, what tells you? I mean, it's keeping in that last question, what tells you? I think it's good to keep it because then you're going to yeah, I think what you can do is the teacher you should tell me more. And even though she was, like the teacher was addressed by one of the students, tell her that she's wrong. Sometimes that's something that just comes up in the moment and you don't to start fighting about it, so I would not like yeah, she's right. But it's totally like I think the question the teacher asks is like opening it up to them. What things does the author do in the book to make them think or make them feel that the teacher's not responsible for giving them the answer? And sometimes you read some books and you can tell, I don't know, like when they're animals and like, I don't know, a girl can wear shorts or something and sometimes they don't say he or she and you don't know what it is. I've never tried it. She's not so girly.
And the kids love talking to each other. Not like a religious thing. They just love like, oh no. Kind of like, hey, nice to meet your girl. So, I think it's
Also helps create
Would anyone want to share out what you would think of your classroom, how you could maybe expand on this without discrediting your students' ideas or points of view, opinions?
Well, we were all saying here, like, almost this exact conversation happened in my class, and then we were kind of talking about what we would do next. And I guess we had said, like, just opening it up to everyone and having a conversation, what makes you think that, and using maybe some conversation stems to kind of keep them going and letting them disagree or agree with each other.
Right, I think it really provides opportunity for a really good teachable moment to validate different opinions and see where it plays out, I guess.
So yeah, to that point, we talked about how what's cool about this discussion, because it is sort of so abstract, is that you can bring it back to the book and the evidence, or like the picture that they're both talking about.
Yeah.
And then the idea that it's not about coming to a definitive answer. The idea could be more, or the discussion rather, could be more about, isn't this so interesting? We both have different opinions on the same thing. That's what makes reading so interesting, or that's what makes, these kinds of discussions so interesting, and that's super powerful for especially young kids, and then to carry with them,
Yeah, I felt like when I first started reading this book, I was like, how could you possibly apply this with 4-year-olds? These concepts are too big but if you're breaking them down in a way that just allows them to have a voice and have a discussion about it, I think that it can be carried through the older grades and really give them a respectful platform to disagree with each other or work through difficult issues without like fighting or, I don't know.
The other thing I learned about from this book is that like maybe you have, a quick discussion about this and nothing really comes of it, but then, a kid goes to McDonald's 2 days later and sees there's a Happy Meal with like boy-oriented toys and girl-oriented toys, and then that makes them think of this conversation, and then they bring it back to the classroom, and before you know it, you've sparked a whole other kind of debate.
We talked along the same vein as that of how it could be about like going back to the book and getting that evidence, what makes you think that, or what from your life makes you think that. And then we ended on the fact that after that discussion you can talk about whether it matters, that we don't know whether it's a boy or a girl, and come to the conclusion that, oh, I guess like we can think it's a boy, we can think it's a girl, but it doesn't really affect how we understand the story.
Like that's like a perfect segue into the second vignette, which is the second part of this conversation that's on the back of the sheet. And if you could read that and then discuss with your group the questions that we've put up here as well. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you remember the stage?
Yeah. discussion, like, oh, there are no boy pigs, there are just girl pigs, or, right? Okay.
Which one says I would just write.
Sorry, just like that.
Now when I can picture what book this is, I can picture in my head. They're quite funny.
So are these books called the pig, or they call it everything?
Yeah, that's what it's right.
Is it a series?
Yes.
I never really knew about
Well,
that.
that's the idea.
I think just like and she has
Conversation about like, I don't know, trying to make them see that color doesn't have to like what color it is, or what kind of toys they like, or like girls can have short hair, but it's boys can be calm, and girls can also get excited.
so like that's why like I never heard that. That's how girls can like this too. I'm guessing that maybe she was into that and like they were questions on it. Maybe girls want
Alright guys, if we can pull it back. What did you guys think about how you can add to this discussion in the future? Because a big part of the book that she kept bringing up was that you can start the conversation in the moment and then take what they've got and kind of do a little bit more planning, because even though this may be spontaneous, you can always bring it back with a plan and a more, I don't know, clear motive to what you want to come from it or what you want them to pull out of it. But how could you add to it?
We picked out how Ryan picks out character traits, like that girls are calm and that boys are crazy. And so we thought maybe that would be kind of a conversation for the future.
We really liked that it ended as an open-ended, like there isn't a one right answer. Because we were talking about like kids we've taught who are a little bit older, like they kind of always think that like you ask a question and there has to be a right answer, and they have a really hard time with things being like, yep, I guess we don't know. Like some people think this, some people think this. And so we thought that like this was really great to be doing with 4-year-olds because it really prepares them for like, look for evidence in the text to back up what you think, and like it's okay if some people think one thing and some people think something else, and like that's all right.
And I think that's so important because like how we spoke about in this class, how we were looking at the cards, how like the girls' cards were pink and the boys' cards were like, what was it, like Thomas? Yeah, so I think having that conversation young with Michelle's students can show them like, all right, it's okay to think different. It's okay for a girl to have short hair. It's okay for a girl to want a Hot Wheel in her Happy Meal. So I think that's really important just to start that now. But it's also like, how do you do that in your classroom without making it uncomfortable for the kids, because they might live in a place where that's what they talk about in their homes and therefore.
After vignette, we were also talking about, like, yeah, it's okay that we have different ideas, and like, yeah, it's okay that some girls could have short hair, or like some boys could like pink dresses, or cakes with, oh yeah, the Barbie cake, right? But I think like you could even follow that inquiry further to say, where do those thoughts come from, right? So like, where does it even come, why is it a convention that, you know, a girl's card should be pink? And
when you go into McDonald's, like why is it a convention that the girls' toys are a certain character?
I think it's fun kind of to challenge it in a 4-year-old because you can really get a genuine answer out of them, and it's kind of fun to do it this young. When I first started reading this book, I was like, there's no way. They're not going to pull this out of it. But if you give them the time to like think about it and talk about it, you can really be surprised with what they generate and with what they come up with. So we were saying, what do you think the challenges with this approach could be? And not just gender related, but with the book, many different topics were raised, and how you could maybe approach it in your classroom, or what challenges you could foresee with leaving the door open to do that.
You guys could talk to your group members.
Asking all these questions, it's because I feel like they made a big like why should we just go along with it, and then like they're already going to come in with all this knowledge on board and all their questions, and if you just start it over, almost like let's read this book again, and like kind of like last time you said this, like let's go like off of it, you know, like yeah. And there's so many resources for objects and things that are all around. And they're like the first time around was you get like that, if you want to bring it up, and then the second time around, I always notice things like where you're lifting and instances, and I say, oh, that's right. Once they know that that's how this sets it up, have like you read a book because you get what you need and you get out. 2 hours in 1 day.
Important topic, like what if it's like long and critical literacy, so the practice they were talking about, like what if the kids just like, don't like have to know yet, you know, like they're like trying to do, like what if they just don't like understand it or not, or like they just don't like on it and talk about it, bringing it up again.
Yeah, we're like stuff like this. It seems like.
All right, so what do you guys think that the challenges could be with this approach?
We talked about trying to make the most of teachable moments, but also not knowing how parents will react to those moments that you're trying to make the most of. So it can be kind of challenging to figure out when you should expand upon something without parental consent.
I feel like word choice is really hard with this. Like gender, you can even walk the line a little bit easier than maybe if they brought up, I think of a controversial issue off the top of my head, but yes, thank you, smart. But like then going home, and I feel like the parents will have something to say always, and I feel like it's a hard line to walk.
And even Vasquez acknowledges that in her book, and she talks about how like a lot of the kids in her class their parents had specifically requested for them to be in her class because they knew about her or they had siblings that were in the class before. So she didn't have some of that barrier for the most part.
Any other challenges?
I feel like with this kind of teaching that you need to be in a building where the administration is supportive of this kind of teaching, so that if you did have an issue with a student or an issue with a parent or something like that, that the principal would have your back, you know? Because I think that it's great that they were requesting her, but in certain districts or in certain schools, she would have been moved, you know?
So that, I think, yeah, that's pretty much what we said. And comfort level of the teacher being able to talk about controversial issues and feeling confident enough to talk about them in a leveled way. That you're not putting a bias or your ideas into your class and letting them have genuine ideas, opinions, and voices.
And that was the main thing that we were talking about as we were coming up with this presentation. These were our challenges, just like you guys said, the comfort level and the parent, because we could say one thing in the classroom, but we don't know how it's gonna go when they go home. And I know Michelle tells me stories like in her classroom where she'll teach something and she has parents emailing her, and it's like, you know, how do you know that barrier? So that's definitely a challenge, because like we can only do so much in the classroom. Once they go home, they could be learning a totally different thing.
But I think to try to adapt any of this in your classroom, just kind of
A little bit.
tune into what your students are saying, what they're passionate about, and kind of acknowledge that and expand on it in any way you can in your classroom. It's kind of an interesting way to go. So, I think pretty much we said that. That's it.
I don't know where else to start, but I hear like there's a composing, so it should work. Okay, it'll work.
So we're presenting about Anne Dyson's The Brothers and Sisters Learn How to Write. Learn to Write. And Dyson, as you probably read some of the articles, is known for her work of like really bringing out the childhood in literacy. So we would like to start with a short clip. And so pay attention to the screen.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got the real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam. Here's your chance, do your dance at the Space Jam. Alright.
But we would like you to turn on top of your tables and talk about what memories do you have from this video movie. And if you have any memories of you interacting with your friends around this text, if you did, how did you interact with your friends? And if you didn't see this text, maybe you can think about a similar one from your childhood.
Bugs Bunny and Michael Jackson. He's like, Michael like you're tired from basketball. Like now I'm and then so the cartoon world. So like Sam would go back and it's really good.
Okay, so would anybody like to share if they have any memories of how they interacted with his pets, with their friends. We know it was a long time ago. But you have some memories.
We watched that movie in my class when I was little and it came out, and we all loved that movie. So like we would talk about it, we'd sing a song, and like it was, we all loved it in my class. But it was awesome. I still love it.
I was gonna say too, that the movie sort of held its own place when I was younger, but that song kind of has carried, like, I played volleyball in high school and that was on our warm-up mix, but probably for the same kind of reason that is what I think you're trying to prove here. Like, it was a throwback, it made us feel happy and sentimental and, you know.
So that song is actually an example of a textual toy, which is something that Dyson's study played around with a lot in the text. And textual toys are any media material that becomes playful toys. And it can provide conceptual content, functional genres, models of textual structures and elements. It can give you a pool of characters and themes and plots and all sorts of things to draw upon in your work. And it can include anything from books and movies to songs, sports, TV, activities outside of school, video games. Pretty much anything you encounter in your everyday life can be used as a textual toy.
So kind of like an overview of the book. So essentially Ann Dyson was a researcher in this like first grade classroom in East San Francisco, the East San Francisco Bay District. And it was a first grade class, and so some of the names that you might hear as we give some examples. So these were like the brothers and sisters of the class. Marcel, Winona, Denise, Vanessa, Noah, and Lakeisha. And they were like the brothers and sisters, this group that she sort of followed, and or that she studied. And the quote at the top kind of like summarizes like sort of her research aim. And it says, so through what means do young children, contemporary kids in media-saturated times, appropriate written language into an already richly productive repertoire? So she kind of took this, like wanted to kind of shift our perspective. So we kind of have a tendency to look at child culture from the perspective of like official school practices, and then look at child culture through that lens. And she kind of tried to flip that. So look at official school culture through a child culture lens. So looking how, you know, textual toys and how media help kids, you know, appropriate and acquire written language and learn to write, essentially.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Amy just started. There was two ideas going on here. The classroom family, which is like basically the whole class and the teacher, Rita. And Rita describes in that quote as a group of people who not only cared about each other, but had a commitment and sense of responsibility to what they did together. That's the classroom community. And they're participating in the official communicative practices of school, like reading and writing. And the fake family that she refers to is the brothers and sisters, and they are using this unofficial communicative practices of the textual toys and the common landscape, she calls it. And they're using these textual toys or the media to kind of enter into the official practices of school. I think that line at the bottom kind of sums it up, that the brothers and sisters engaged in multimodal productions and used their diversity of resources. They drew upon these textual toys from the unofficial world to participate in the official world. So one example of one of the chapters was specifically related to one of the students, Marcel, but he wasn't the only one engaged in this topic. So he saw and used sports as a textual toy. He really liked football, but they mentioned other sports too. So he used school value practices to organize and display his knowledge upon sports through these unofficial sports sources that he used. Writing was the connection between the official and the unofficial world which they lived. And we could see a negotiation between symbolic and social boundaries in different ways. And some examples that reflected this multimodal learning and remixing of the textual toy were some maps, technological conventions of TV screen displays, some lists, informational text. He reflected his football expertise, and he even wrote down like reports of the sport games, as you can see in the examples.
Another one of the textual toys that they used was any sort of animation. And one of the family members, Noah, would reconceptualize the different animations and TV shows and things that he saw into his writing through multimodality. He would have characters hanging off the words, and he'd have almost like a movie going through his writing. And this quote kind of pulls together that whole idea. These voices were woven into the fabric of their everyday lives through the childhood practices they engaged in, both inside and outside of the school's physical spaces. The children brought these voices into the intertextual universe of Rita's classroom family, where their precise ramifications could never have been predicted. And so Noah would use Looney Tunes and Little Bear and Donkey Kong in his writing to bring it to life, and he took the characters and the settings and the ideas from all of these animations into his writing.
And a third textual tool that they used was music. So a lot of children use the musical voices that they experience in their everyday lives, such as from church or from the radio, to help them create written pieces in their actual school. So some of the ways that they included it was by including like the names of characters in their stories, by referring them to somebody in songs or in radios or anyone in popular music. They would use the names in their stories. They would also use specific songs or recurring themes that they saw in the music around them. Some communicative practices that they did was in their conversations. They included interviews or raps or even love songs, and they sometimes wrote about it as dialogue in their stories. They also used technological symbols, such as using vocabulary or phrases that they heard on the radio. They also, as you can see in this picture here, she wrote about when I grew up, I want to be a singer, and in her actual picture, she's singing What's Love Got to Do with It. And a powerful quote that we got from this was that stories are constructed with the sound and rhythm of words, and it was evident through the children's writing that the music around them played a big impact in learning to write.
One of the takeaways I got from the book is that language diversity should be really respected and celebrated within the classroom, and ways teachers can do that, ways they can normalize language variation is by sharing literature and music that's written in a variety of dialects. For instance, the poet Eloise Greenfield, she has the ability to appropriate and remix diverse everyday voices. So she's adept at both, the so-called standard American English and also in writing in a dialect. So if you want your students to be able to get a grasp on different types of language, ways to use language, you do need explicit instruction. Rita in the book explicitly discussed variations in linguistic features, such as vocabulary and pronunciation. So the students in her class, they remix a text through writing, drawing, model making, or dramatizing. And doing so helps them to delve more deeply into their experiences, and it also inspired their writing, being exposed to like these different voices. So with that in mind, you're going to remix a text yourself, working at your table with the people you're sitting with. Each table will get a poem or a song from popular culture, and together you can remix it into any mode in order to make meaning of the text. You can use the whole text, like if you get like a short poem, or if you get a song that's a little lengthy, you could choose to use just an excerpt from that song. And here's some ideas of how you could remix the text. You could draw. We have markers and chart paper. You could decide to sing if you feel brave. You can act it out. You can read it out loud. You could do choral reading or any type of reading you like. Or you can maybe write something in response to it. But you have just complete liberty to be creative. So I'm going to come by with the text.
Also, you're going to have 5 minutes to plan together and then 2 minutes for your presentation. So just keep that in mind for time.
Okay, so here you have Dreams by Eloise Greenfield. I have a time. And you have Harriet written in a state
There's markers and charts.
Yeah, absolutely. We should take
I'll give the 5 minutes. It's like you break it up, so usually it sounds like that, but
You want some paper?
yeah, so
and then I'll go and Rebecca, you'll let you read
Yeah, not necessarily people, but like how many years?
Okay.
Like, yeah. All say my name.
About like they spend so much time with it and it's just like doesn't matter to me. Summer's here. Thank God.
Walk in the door.
And I figured it makes it their own wife and mine.
Didn't come in this
With your hands, 0 if you're ready, and 1 if you need 1 more minute. Okay, so that's what we're
I feel like tomorrow is like the normal way, and then I'll make them like
So you change the drawing. We're changing the words. Maybe we should just
Okay, do we have a group that feels ready to, you could just present from your table? Yeah, okay. So just like what text do you have? We have Cool Lyrics by Echo Smith. What? Cool Kids Lyrics, Cool Kids Lyrics. It's a song? Echo Smith. Okay, so we have all right, so we're gonna act it out. I don't know if that's serious. We already started. Oh. Sorry. I wish I could be like the cool kids, because all the cool kids, they seem to fit in. I wish I could be like the cool kids, just like the cool kids. Very nice remixing. They're creative. Anyone else?
Yeah. So we had Harriet Tubman by Eloise Greenfield sort of written in a, what you said,
AAVE dialect.
Sure.
Yeah. American vernacular.
Okay, and we're gonna read it like a poem in 2 voices, kind of. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff.
Wasn't scared of nothing neither.
Didn't come in this world to be no slave.
And wasn't going to stay one either.
Farewell, she sang to her friends one night. She was mighty sad to leave them.
But she ran away that dark hot night.
Ran looking for her freedom.
Didn't come in this world to be no slave. And didn't stay one either.
So ours is, we rewrote the poem Things by Eloise Greenfield. Went to my classroom, walked in the door, met my new students. School year's over, ain't got them no more, ain't got them no more. Looked at my student letters, remembered their love, still got it, still got it.
We kind of did the poem thing too, so.
Put your makeup on and get your nails done. curl your hair, run the extra mile, keep it slim.
So they like you? Do they like you?
Get your sexy on. Don't be shy, girl. Take it off. This is what you want to belong.
So they like you? Do you like you?
You don't have to try so hard. You don't have to give it all away. You just have to get up, get up, get up, get up. You don't have to change a single thing.
Oh, yeah, Colby Kelly tried.
Thank you very much for sharing. Those are all very creative, and it just shows how much opportunity there is for students to put themselves into remixing the text.
Okay, so we wanted to conclude our presentation by kind of thinking together as a group of how this could look in our own classrooms, how remixing and using textual toys could help foster literacies in our classrooms. Does anyone have anything, any ideas of ways that we can use this in the classroom?
We thought we'd just like open it up and then you can jot down ideas that you hear.
This was kind of like a big question that we had talked about. Like we kind of brainstormed some ideas of ways that we could use it in the classroom, and we were kind of like wanting more. So it was kind of like the idea of, sharing ideas and then, taking some back to our classroom.
I was thinking about the textual choice thing, and I taught high school, and there's a book by a man named Kelly Gallagher, and he does a lot of like bringing in your interests and allowing you to like write, on those interests. And so you would have, like say you wanted to write about volleyball or whatever, and then you would break it down so that you could write a narrative piece about volleyball, an analytical piece about volleyball, so that it like really keeps it within the students' interests.
Kind of reminds me of a workshop that I went to recently with Colleen Cruz, and she just talked a lot about incorporating pop culture into teaching literacy, but in one of the examples she gave was like if you looked at the pop song with the kids and you kind of close read it, and I think the example she used was happy, and like there was like a clear thesis and reasons, and so kind of like using those things to as a jumping off point.
I saw that one. That's really good.
Any other ideas?
One thing I took away from is in teaching literacy, especially for like a poetry unit, you can really show the students that their way of speaking is valued. If they, use slang or, have like a particularly whimsical way of talking, that isn't something that needs to be gotten rid of, but they can use it in their work. Some of the girls in the book were performing the Harriet Tubman poem, and they kind of just like subconsciously corrected the language. I think the line wasn't scared of nothing neither, and they read it wasn't scared of anything neither, just like subconsciously. And the teacher noticed that. She's like, Eloise Greenfield didn't make a mistake. She meant to write it like that. So it's, poetry is a really good way to celebrate, diverse languages.
We were also thinking about just how it's really important just to value what the students are bringing in, no matter what it is, and don't shut it down when they come in. Don't have them leave their home things at home and their school things at school. It really is very fluid, and that they should be bringing those textual toys from home to be able to play with them and work with them in the classroom, and that we as teachers need to be open to what the students are doing and willing to let it thrive.
And we're always looking for ways to get kids to write, and this is a way to get them to talk and write.
Pulling up to this hour presentation, we're going to ask you to move. It is the last one, so maybe it'll be good with the blood flowing. So I'm going to go around and number you 1, 2, and 3. Ones will sit over here. twos in the middle. If you could like push the table together and be a group, and then threes over here. Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. In the beginning, you need to sit in a circle, and then you won't sit in a circle. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. You can move now. Twos are in kind of the middle. Yeah, circle-ish, just so your back isn't to something. Twos are in the middle, ones are over there. Just make sure you can, we're going to do a text rendering is what we're doing, so that you can go around.
I should have came earlier.
Hey guys, okay everybody.
Good job, listener. So we read Immigrant Students in Literacy, Reading, Writing, and Remembering, which is by Gerald Capano, who actually happens to be Professor Ghiso's husband. And this book is all about using kids' lives to enrich the curriculum and allow them to make meaning of their lives and in turn get more out of the curriculum. So we really learned the power in knowing your students in this book. Not knowing your students creates limits for their learning and also limits for your teaching. We're going to jump right into a text rendering of a script that was created by students. So the author of this book was asked to create a presentation about management because his classroom had a really great culture. There weren't a lot of behavior problems with this group that had had a lot of issues in the past. And instead he turned it over to the students and said, you guys come up with this presentation for other teachers about classroom management. And so they created a script in which they expressed their stories and their challenges within the limits of teachers and societies, the limits that teachers and societies were putting on them. So we are going to give you all this script. As you read through it or through your section, underline a sentence or phrase as well as a word that really sticks out to you. We'll give you 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll go around in our groups and share out. Also keep in mind what implications does this student-centered script have on your teaching and your perceptions of students.
Any questions? Yes.
So I'm going to just you guys a little closer because it's a text rendering. Text
We'll give you 2 minutes to read.
I'm expecting that. Okay, this is on the other
A phrase and a word. Phrase and word. Alright,
Oh, we're just doing it?
like, yeah, let's do the sentence first and phrase and word. Alright, the sentence first. Yeah, sentence first. Phrase.
I guess you don't know how to talk. All I can do is take one day at a time.
Also, in my culture, silence has meaning.
Every individual has his or her own beliefs.
I don't think nothing wrong with that.
But the teacher didn't know.
Every individual has his or her own
Culture, diversity, caring,
Personality.
understand, beliefs. Alright, so now we're going to be talking a little bit about what implications does this student-created script have on your teachings and your perceptions. So remember, students there was no teacher helping them. So what, like as I'm reading it, I was like, this piece of like the script, like implications that it had, and how does that kind of change your perception of the students, and how it's you the students and the students even think of you. Think about that. Yes, go. So Mr. Sid was no, Mr. Sid is a teacher that the students make up. Oh, okay. Maybe I should give you a little bit. Alright, so the teachers no, okay, so they made up these teachers because they wanted to show how teachers sometimes don't understand what students are going through, and they just have their own beliefs of what the students are, and they make things like that, and they really don't know what's going on. And they want to show you the teachers because they put up these that everything is to kind of show more open.
How they turned around what they were just feeling, ended up being a reflection on him inside. So he really does understand that he has his own beliefs, and there's some that his children don't know why he really loved them. I think that was really cool and twisted about him.
That it's not easy for us either, and that we should both be able to do both.
Well, it was things about yourself. And it turns out that some of his father children have seen you had 5 or 6 kids in this family, and his mother was those religion and so she was and so and then
I think it's important to give students voice, because I think if you don't know your students, something like, for example, that you're giving, something like this is happening in class where you think that someone may not understand or not comprehending the text, but really it's like, I don't value my culture, silence is a virtue. I thought that was
I think the choice of the teacher to put it comprehend and it's the students is really important, because usually when you think behavior management in a classroom and like a well-managed class, you think the teacher has control. But he really made the behavior management not about controlling kids, but about giving them the freedom to be the kind of people that they are in the classroom, so that it possible to yeah. If you think about it, it's
and then you're
We even say I've lost the respect as a teacher, we say that the kids don't respect me, and that's why they're senior year. And I really always promote your kids. If you guys can speak about helpers, like helpers were once we should just speaking and failed us for sleeping and the teacher is just like, because what the teacher doesn't know is education and attached to it and like all these things. And so like it's a lot of but it's really interesting that what you said about the respect, that you should respect them so they can respect you. Yeah, so in your own teaching ethics, how would here, take mine. Alright, so like in your own teaching, let's say, how would that be to change the way that you might see like the text that we just read?
I always think about it because there are 30 kids in my classroom, and in a day where I have to get a million things done, it's so hard to keep your focus on the fact that these are 30 little people who have their own lives and who have their own trouble and who have their own struggles and their own feelings, and not see it as like that I am a teacher and I have to get my things done, but be able to connect one-on-one and like understand that they are people with feelings. So it's like a constant reminder that like you are a teacher, but beyond that you are an adult that cares about them and to see them individually.
I've talked about this, but I had a quote from some book, some article that was all about how there's 180 days you guys usually spend just a couple of sleep. And yeah, nights will be more intense, but you really don't need to be that stressed about the day-to-day routine. And I'm hitting every single standard, every single day, days. But you have these kids for 180 days, and you have a chance to really see with them, to really care for them and nurture them through that time. And that's the standards checked off and done, like promo like better, capitalize, and use that to help you.
Engaging conversation.
Okay. Alright, so like Natalie said before, we read the book Introducing Students to Literacy, Reading, Writing, and Remembering by Gerald Quintana. And this book demonstrates the power of storytelling and collective memory. And it's storytelling from the kids' perspective. So it's all stories that the children wrote themselves from their own lives. And it also talks about how culturally responsive teaching can make their learning come alive. And it really celebrates the students' differences instead of like presenting them as deficits. He really just wants to cultivate their differences and celebrate them, right? And he also talks a lot about building community. And here's a quote from the book about community that he wrote. This is when the work of cultivating a community through collective memory becomes all the more urgent. Community is formed through particular understandings of individual children, their unique experiences, and cultural identities, and is manifested in the quotidian, imperfect dynamics of everyday classroom interaction. So his idea was that first, he really wanted the students to think into their own lives and to use their own personal stories to really express themselves through their stories. But then he brought all their stories together to build that classroom community. Because he felt that the most important thing is really that they have a place to talk about it and to relate to one another and to celebrate their differences and all that.
Yeah, so with that being said, we kind of have compiled a packet of various data from across ages, across races, genders, ethnicities, cultures, you name it. We've kind of compiled a bunch of student work, and we are asking you in your groups to sort of examine these data and think about sort of specific questions, which I'll tell you in a second. But we want this to be more of like an inquiry process. It's actually something that was talked a lot about in the book, and sort of the power of inquiry and sort of how you can, develop an idea about someone or about your community together. And so that's what we kind of want you guys to engage in now. Okay, so you each, there's a show you the packet. Looks like this, but it's made up of all different things. So you can kind of spread it out between. There's lots of different parts to it. You'll see when I put it on your table. And then you each are going to get one of these. It has the 3 questions we'd like you to think about. It's also up there. So we'd like you to, as you're looking through the data, when you think about what does this tell us about the student's identity, so just as the person as you're reading their, whatever it might be, how does this student's personal experience relate to the greater classroom community? So how does whatever you're reading or analyzing or interpreting from the data kind of influence and relate to how the whole classroom might operate together? And then how can you integrate this knowledge of that particular student and who they are, their identity and their story, into your curriculum to make learning come alive for your students and for you. So, any questions on what you're going to do? And you can write down your ideas, you can think about your ideas. We're going to talk about them as a whole group too, so whatever works for you. Okay.
As you're looking through them, there's a couple lenses through which you could look. So I'll just put up a couple quotes which are like the lens through which Campana was looking at student stories and students' responses to reading to try to get to know them better to see how he could structure his curriculum.
So the first, well, you all can read, but I'll read it out loud too. Similarly, her story offered a means not only of working through, but also of making available or objectifying an interior state so that others might respond. She wrote to exteriorize what was once, as she wrote, stored up in my heart and mind so that it might be shared with those who cared.
Another lens that I used, that shows that lens, was some of my most profound teaching moments occurred when our classroom literacy engagements became informed by the students' own experiences and identities. And then another lens through which you can look is, perhaps more than anything else, the book may be a meditation on the significance of relationships. The relationships between students and teachers, students to one another, and students to literacy in the world. So these are some things you can think about as you're looking through the student data.
It's a whole bunch of things we have to take care of them, inspect them. They're the same So we have a whole bunch of things here. We have some first graders that are writing journals about the weekend. We have some vignettes from a 5th grade classroom. We have some 4th grade pieces and some journals and then some 8th grade pieces for activities for going on. I don't remember exactly, but they're all really strong. And then we also have a guided reading lesson. And charts. So I guess just here.
with their grandma. Went to their aunt's office, they had books, and had dinner with her aunt and went to the movie theater and had popcorn. Clearly, that's big.
Really different look at his own life outside of school and being able to value what his parents portray and value his home life and also integrating that to the classroom community, which is very different. So what is it? Was my understanding from he talked a lot and he would not stop talking again because he had no friends. And the teacher, she would get a lot for talking. And then they told me that, and I was like, maybe, we should find other ways to get him to talk because, it's like to talk and get it out of us. Share and touch really
He had an older brother who was in jail, so his dad was going to this is not going to happen. So he's like, you don't have to anything. Yeah. He was so scared. And because the boy was trained to not have friends, I would kind of look past it and he was always a really good kid. Sometimes he would mischievous, but I knew if I would very sure I called him. Yeah. He was really harsh on it. So I would like sometimes catch him in the camera like on his French. So I would give him like the space like other kids and guys focus, but sometimes he want to talk to his friends. Like you don't have friends at home, like it's you and your dad. Your dad's like you can't make friends at school. And he doesn't even give him space to make friends. But when his dad's hungry, kids will talk about it. I know they should have changed that story. I didn't give away the cat. And we had great in the first grade. Seriously? Yeah, he had a 3.9. This is going to mess up his grade. I had a parent want to erase the A minus. Can I erase the minus? I don't know. Actually,
so it's great that you're actually because I was going to ask how like these personal experiences with the students and your own students that's like really contemplating another thing very student at the end I had to change the thing and the other kid got in trouble and it was and then also how can you integrate this knowledge into your curriculum to make the learning more effective? So like you have a whole bunch of things here written by students that show kind of their life. How could you integrate that into your
start the week and just bring it in but then sometimes you don't realize it because you have this week there's ones up there that don't want to do it because ours it's like the child so everyone's like it's like it's you just feel bad that I'm worried because they're fully capable. The idea that they're fully capable. They just show that was a priority. Yeah, she's very self-aware. Yeah.
professional that is, I want people to phrase it so my students point that way, something that they need to be aware of. Like, if you think it's really good, you can encourage it. There's no guidance for you to set the size about your child.
Alright, we're going to bring it back together. Clearly that's not enough time to analyze a ton of data, but we wanted to show you hopefully a glimpse into the power of inquiry. Analyzing your students' work to get to know them and to get to know where they're coming from.
And so, if you wouldn't mind just sort of sharing out a little bit about what you talked about at your tables, sort of in regards to the 3 questions, or just this one too. What are the implications for your teaching going forward after looking at sort of, what was in front of you and also sort of what you've already talked about before.
Well, I read a piece by Lisa, she was an 8th grader, an 8th grade girl about stereotypes and how she stereotypes because of where she lives and how she talks, even though she has like a 4.0 GPA. And she's very self-aware, and she, mentions how if you can make the switch from like ghetto to professional, you can erase those stereotypes. So I would think that it's a very delicate subject matter to bring up, but that would be something to bring up to students, like what can you do to debunk stereotypes or like to change how people think of you. It's kind of a shame that they do feel the onus is on them to change the way people think, but I think that's a lot of work.
And even exploring that too, through and using literacy lens to do that, I think would be really good.
I used to teach seniors in high school, and they always had to write their college essays, and so I always start the year with a narrative, like a personal narrative unit. And it ended up being just a great way to start the year because you got such a picture into their everyday lives. And, it changed your view of the kids kind of right off the bat, to know a little bit of what's going on at home or like how you were raised. I mean, I was so surprised that, a lot of my kids were foster kids and had these really awful experiences and, had made it through high school and everything, so, yeah.
Any reactions to the specific things you had in front of you, like, or, connections to your own teaching, things that surprised you, things that you found interesting? Yeah.
I just looked at this big vignette of the first grader in the cave, and it was just that last line. That's why I talk so much here, because I have got friends, and it's like, how often do we just say be quiet, so that we can teach? But like, take a step back for 1 minute, and like, that's why he's talking. Like, oh my god. So, yeah. That's my reaction.
I think that's a good point, and that's like Hannah's big point is we have to let the kids' lives and their conversations become the curriculum in a way, and use those to teach. The standards will come. What's interesting, you read at the end of the book, his kids got like the highest test scores his school's ever seen. But he wasn't using the standard curriculum, he was using the kids' lives to facilitate his curriculum and then get to the students through that.
And so we're going to leave you with one last probably quotes. It's Hacknell. So he says that the first stance is to never imagine our students as not succeeding, to sustain an unconditional faith in each student. So he's pretty much just telling us to never give up on them. I mean, we might not initially understand like why they're acting the way they might be acting, to just let them figure it out, let them write about it, show them who they really are, and they're going to succeed if you believe that they can succeed. I totally messed that up. And so we just have to believe that they can do it, and they will, and they could prove everybody wrong.
Oh, we're starting.
Go ahead.
Okay, we read Literary Practices as Social Acts by Cynthia Lewis and its power, status, and cultural norms in the classroom. And the reason that she wrote this book was to understand the ways that the literary culture of the classroom is created within the interwoven social context of classroom and community. So she was using everyday literature practices, but looking at them in a different light and using them in a different way. By asking how are literacy practices shaped by discourses and rituals within the classroom, and by social codes and dominant cultural norms beyond the classroom. So it's a deeper look, a different side of the story.
So the way that the book was structured was in 4 different literacy practices that happened in a classroom. The teacher's name was Julia, and so it studied the way that Julia's classroom incorporated these 4 different literacy practices. So I'm going to talk quickly about the way that she structured Read Aloud. It was a little bit different than the way that it's typically structured in a classroom, in that she only did Read Aloud in the beginning of the year, and it served a very specific purpose. So the question that she wanted to answer with her class around Read Aloud was, what do we all have in common? And so she started the year with a Read Aloud with the author called a Read Aloud ritual to sort of induct everybody into the same culture of the classroom and to answer that question, what they all have in common. And so there were certain things that she always incorporated in her Read Aloud. She always had a book with a hero, and it was always something that the kids could kind of debate, whether that character was heroic or not. Was something that she really liked to ask questions about. It also happened at the same time every single day, and kids all sat in the same place, although it wasn't assigned. They just all decided to sit in these places, and they always did. And the reason that she liked this ritual was that it created a kind of culture, and that was the point of Read Aloud. The author said that the culture that Julia tried to create in the classroom through Read Aloud was the kind of culture in which Julia herself would have wanted to live. And so the aspects of this culture were that people care what other people think, and so she focused a lot on listening to what your peers said and saying something related to that. And also that they find common ground. And so something really important around the culture was that everybody has something in common. And then also it was a culture of inquiry. So she encouraged kids to ask questions. And through the Read Aloud, she developed these aspects of culture that she tried to carry on throughout the rest of the year.
The next part that I'm going to talk about is the peer-led literature discussions. And she had groups of students reading different books, and they lead the discussion on their own. And what she found is that despite her removing her role as the leader of these groups, power still was very prevalent amongst the students, especially based on gender and also based on socioeconomic status. And what I found from that chapter is that there are visible differential status and power within classrooms. In the classroom that was studied, age, gender, and ability surfaced repeatedly and challenged power relationships in the peer-led literature discussions. She also notes that it's important to choose groups based on how allegiances will play out. That was a really interesting part of the peer-led discussions, where that students had these strange allegiances where they like gang up on one student and discredit what another student had to say, or make them feel like their opinion wasn't as valued. She also talks about how schools regulate what it means to be a good student. In the study that she had, it was a 5th, 6th grade classroom, and the 6th graders were the ones who had more power, especially the 6th grade girls. A few quotes from the text that I thought were important to think about are that peer-led groups are not without their complications, however, and recent studies suggest that taking the teacher out of a text-based discussion does not necessarily result in equitable relations. The roles in social networks are intertwined and knotty, leaving students with much to negotiate, not only in terms of how discussions proceed, but also in terms of how texts are understood. So the question that they were trying to understand in the peer-led literature discussions are, what are our social roles? And it actually comes across when you look at the dialogue between the students, how students regulate their own social roles within the groups.
So she also used teacher-led discussions, and this was the main question she was asking during this, and the main purpose of the teacher-led discussion was, why do we believe what we believe? The performance during the teacher-led discussion was focused more on the interpretation of the text rather than on the negotiation of social roles. Julia led the group, and therefore locus of power as well. And so because of that, kind of in contrast to the peer-led, there was less kind of, they more so contested her authority rather than like contesting each other's authority within the group. The text was considered the cultural conversation, such as, and they were looking at the historical as well as the cultural context of the text. And she asked questions that the students wouldn't necessarily think to ask or think that they were important. And during these teacher-led discussions, often the student responses volleyed back and forth between her and the students rather than going between students. But she also then used that power during these teacher-led discussions to take some of her power and put it onto a student whose voice wasn't receiving the authority that it should have had. So she would revoice their ideas to give kind of authority or power to that person within the teacher-led discussion.
And the last practice that she used was independent reading, which gave the students choice in what they were reading. And it kind of allowed the dominant culture away into the classroom, because the culture of her classroom is very much flipped, where a lot of the students complained that like, oh, the girls are more important, and that she like likes the girls more. And so she kind of overcompensated with giving girls power in the classroom, because generally we don't have it outside of the classroom. And independent reading flipped that and brought in the dominant culture, because a lot of adolescent novels reinforce power structures and position women in submissive ways. So a lot of times in these books, the girls are like the damsel in distress, and the guy comes and like saves the day. And so it was interesting to see how the students took that and used it and accepted, rejected, or reinvented it. There was one student who she accepted the victimization of girls as normal, but she understood that the popular text she read were structured to position girls this way. So she's like, okay, I recognize that they're doing this, and it's fine. I'm okay with that. Another girl reinvented her position as a female reader of text victimizing girls, so she changed the way that she looked at it. And then there was a boy and some other boys who used horror text to accept but also reinvent popular versions of masculinity. So they kind of changed the way that they saw like what is masculine. And they also, it was really interesting, their social roles, because the kids who weren't so much the educated, came from a privileged upbringing, who had power in other sections of the class, they had power here because they were like tied into popular culture, and that's what a lot of the adolescent books brought into the classroom.
So after reading about Julia's classroom, we were like, well, wait, how does it actually play out in classrooms that we're in right now? So currently I'm interning in a third grade classroom on the Upper East Side, and I took a look at how do my students and my teachers look and see about read aloud, like what is their purpose behind it, as well as within their peer-led discussion groups, how does that look? Within their the teacher-led discussions, how does that look compared to Julia's? And then lastly, within the independent book choice or independent reading, like how does that compare? So what you'll be looking at today, you're already in your lovely 4 groups. Each of you will get an artifact from the classroom, whether it's a transcript of a learning experience or one of them is kind of a summary of the different teacher actions and student actions during a different part of the day. What we're looking for you to do, actually, was that you? So you'll see at the top of each of them, and I'll come around and pass them on in just a second, you'll see Julia's purpose to remind you like what the big question she was asking, working towards during that part of the day, as well as how did it look in Vicky's classroom or my classroom, more of the traditional way that we use those literature practices within the classroom.
So I gave you guys the worksheet, and I'm just going to spend like 1 minute so that you can see how to use it. We just need to assign group numbers, so you guys have group 1, okay, group 2, group 3 here, and group 4 right here, all right? As you look at these artifacts, what you want to do is, so I've given you on the top here the questions for each of the sections, right? And so up here you have how does read aloud foster Christian expression and a positive literary community. So group 1, you're going to look at the artifacts through that lens, okay? You're going to look specifically for that evidence. Group 2, you're going to focus on this group 2 question. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. This space right here is a note catcher for you. As you look at the artifacts, as you read through, just jot down some notes under these 3 general areas, okay? And once again, it's a note catcher to help you. If it doesn't work for you, there's plenty of room at the bottom here, okay? So anyway, some way of structuring what you were looking for, okay? So each group has a focus question, which aligns with one of the 4 areas that Julie would use as far as literacy practices were concerned, okay? And so you're basically just going to analyze these artifacts looking with that purpose.
We didn't necessarily give you the artifact for the group number that you were told, so use the group, like group 1, the group that was read aloud, your group 1, the group that was read aloud, your group 2, so the numbers that we told you, you might.
I just told you. Does that make sense? Apparently when I counted you off, then we didn't. Are we good now? Does anyone have any question about what their group number is?
You guys have independent reading?
Yeah.
So you'll be group 2.
This is 3rd grade, right? It was like 5th, 6th. Like this is like what do they like to read? Why? What do they think is about them? And what this is, looking at it, like the line.
Yeah, and then if you think about it, you like how are girls positioned in American politics?
Yeah.
What? Nobody's heard of American.
Yeah, no, I
Okay, well,
girl books are like adults, which they don't make anymore, like Kirsten and Felicity and all of them. They don't make her like should they make adults like kids. But they all have like stories. So Felicity is like a female girl, and so she's like it's like some books are about her and her life. And Molly is in the World War II, and so she's like born on scrap drives, doing all these things. Samantha like Victoria, and it's all about like her adventures. So they're very like girl focused, and the girls are like the heroes of the story, and they like make things work, and it's more kind of like girl power. Exactly, yeah. Like it's not so much boys are reading those books, and so that really boys are just like. It's a book that Maria reminded me of because she was very feminist and like girls like equality was absolutely forever. And then it was really interesting. Julia's classmate, the girls became very serious, but they weren't like proud of it. They were like, I read them, but like they weren't like want people to know that I read them because it wasn't like, yes. And like she knows, but yeah, and that was something that came up a lot in the classroom. Like, oh, here, the girls are no, that was like very romance. So this is like when she enjoys feelings.
Yes, that makes sense why. Just there wasn't a lot of teacher parents. Like she was reading the book and like everything she was saying was like strategies. And like didn't see. So that's why these are just different things. Really like she used across the book. I like these ways that she gets the kids to respond. Not I guess. Yeah, so these are things that were actually said. Also, there's understanding of someone's kind of just
it's really like she has a strong personality. She kind of made me wonder that we heard it so many times. Yeah.
This is what the teacher wants to see.
Yeah.
But they are defining balance. Like they are explaining themselves. It's like they're not just saying that like wasn't good readers do like stay sticky. They are saying it's not just in my opinion. I don't know that it's like of course right. Right. Yeah. Or anyone can watch my little interview.
It's like transparent because I love them. Is the thing that takes it. This is all my teachers told me that.
Yeah.
Like they know the reasons.
Yeah. It seems that they really believe it.
So the question that Julia, why do we look at
So they had more work to do with she had already because it was different than in their classroom, but it's like in their classroom it just consists of all the same time like should like turn it in that direction. That is like that's it was just I just think some of these points like where the kids like for instance caffeine allowed in classrooms and other kinds of things in the background and actually saw the kids too.
And I know a lot of times that
like doing it, so they're able to bring in these books that they on the spot, write a log out, and compare it so that they became necessary and have a lot more say. And also has to talk because you're really facing something. Whereas when they're talking about that, well, they didn't really like have students asking the teacher. So it was a lot about that. So we have to fix that around day. So that was a lot of what she did think that also when they're yeah, this chapter was always about gender.
And I think besides just short classmates, like
It's counting.
Yeah, sorry.
explaining vocabulary, so I think
Alright guys, if you can just give me your attention really quick. I'm sure you're having great conversations about your specific group. We have a few more general questions on the back. And where it says, Activity 2, small group power status and cultural norms. Your group doesn't have to answer every single question. Given the conversation that you just had, if you want to choose maybe one or two of the questions to dig into, okay? And we'll give you about 5 minutes for that, okay?
We recognize their but it doesn't really Right, and Julia's but she had the videos that were also so that's no longer on the years. We've been doing some in the beginning of the year, and now that they so strong, they're able to more and more articulate, and they're really able to assert themselves and now in new ways to make sense. Over time. Context in your spaces to the kids like they'll shift their mind. You see how the schedules they know certain work and then max those times and I think like this kind of doesn't have to be, but yeah, right. And I think that like like sincere skills, like power shifting way. Oh, were you thinking that's the ones we chose? Oh, we're doing it. Exactly. So I like to make us like confusing you. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Excuse me, guys. We're gonna wrap up the conversation. If there was any group that talked about power, if you could just share out one thing that you all had discussed in your group about power, maybe who holds the power and why. How does the power shift during the literacy interaction? Anyone talk about power in your group?
I think we were like just talking about it. You're just like the last 2 seconds, but and then kind of how Sammy had kind of like started to give it up, I guess, sort of a little bit, and then, but still in a very like authoritative way, like bossing the other, like tell me what you think kind of way, posing questions to Xavier.
One thing is when you share out, everybody has a different transcript, so maybe give a little context about what was happening. No, if you could just give a little context to everybody.
Oh, so the girl Sam, they're like the book group, and the girl Sammy's kind of like bossing everyone around. She obviously holds the power. And then like halfway through, she's having a conversation with this boy, I'm assuming Xavier, and she kind of gives the power up and she asks him a question, say why you agree with me, but it's still like kind of bossy, I guess. And that kind of persists throughout all the way to the end.
What about status? Anyone talk about status in their groups? And maybe how status shifts during your interaction?
No, but we kind of touched on this one kid, Max, who read a lot of books that the majority of the class had read. So he says, if someone saw me read my books, they would be excited because everyone likes the popular books I read. So it's sort of, even though it doesn't go in a direction of gender or, but he is saying that what the majority reads is what is safe and what is even popular.
How about cultural norms? Anybody talk about cultural norms?
We talked about norms. We had transcripts from students who chose the books that they read, and they like described what they chose and what they didn't choose and why choose to read. And something that was interesting was not all of them, but several of the kids chose to say like, I read this kind of book because there aren't girl books and there aren't boy books, and like anybody can read any kind of book. And so that was kind of showing us that in this classroom there's kind of this norm that gender boundaries don't prevent you from your book choices. And that was like expected.
And it was very much like I even tried, one of them kind of brought it up, so I even tried to like prod a little bit and like tried to see if they had judgments, but all of them were very like, no, like why would it matter? And like even brought up an example. He was like, no, like just like TV, like anybody, like boys or girls can watch My Little Pony. So it kind of shows that it's like he's faced it before and he's accepted that like he gets to do whatever he wants even though he's a boy. So
It's a safe classroom for that kind of thing.
As a wrap-up, just for like a whole group discussion, we wanted to kind of reflect on this idea of pedagogy and the implications for a classroom. So what do you think is the importance of considering social acts? Because she really lets the social drama kind of play out and stands aside from it. And so do you think that that's important? What do you see as potential benefits or drawbacks of the teacher kind of removing themselves and giving more power to the students?
I am a firm believer of sometimes, not all the time, but that students sometimes hear things louder or they clearer when it comes from a peer, when it comes from a teacher. So I think again, that's not always the truth, but I think that that's an important sort of like thing to keep in mind.
Good. This group back here, we had kind of mixed feelings, I guess, on how the power ended up playing out when you took the teacher out. Did you want to speak to that real quick? Like when the teacher, the way in which the group kind of ended up running when the teacher wasn't there to.
I think we talked it was really brief. We kind of said, I guess that could have maybe perpetuated the power dynamics a little bit. But I think it's important to kind of step back and as always consider that's a safe space for them. But I think it's important to stay out.
So as far as benefits and drawbacks are concerned, one of the major benefits was that in the book, kind of a takeaway was basically that when you allow the social dynamics to kind of play out through like a more freedom, it allows for individual identity development. That was one of her major takeaways, that it allows the students to kind of explore multiple roles and see which roles they feel comfortable with, and sometimes step outside of their comfort zone if they're pushed to, take on a different role. And so that's in the book what was a major benefit in that. Another good point that I thought that she made was that students have very little unstructured time in schools, and so that there's not a whole lot of opportunity to allow for them to be, exploring their identity and all of that. And so allowing, the social drama to play out a little bit kind of gives them that moment to, explore their identity a bit. How do you think this idea of using social acts then to inform your pedagogy would allow for individual growth and development of the classroom culture? Students as individuals, the classroom culture, like by letting this social drama play out, how does it affect the classroom environment? Go ahead.
I'm connecting it a little bit to our book, but thinking about when we are in complete control of what's happening in the classroom, a lot of the things that students might naturally do don't come out. So a lot of things that might be considered kind or might be considered mean, or things that a teacher should address to raise and to educate respectful and loving young human beings would not come out. So I think one positive thing is you could see those things and then address them and dig into them and think about how to deal with those things. And then a drawback I think would be that in stepping back, the students who I think would be considered the people who are more of the victims of those situations would not feel as safe in situations where they don't have the power.
Right, yeah. And she does also address that because there is a boy who has some creative ideas but feels constantly shut down in the group, and that his ideas, if he was able to voice them, could lead to a deeper conversation. But he, because of the social dynamic, doesn't end up feeling safe to, speak out.
How does she address that?
What's that?
How does she address that?
What does she say? His comments can be seen as just the sort of resistant reading that could move students toward a critical awareness about the ways in which children's literature naturalizes white middle-class Christian worldviews. So if she felt that the boy, if the group had allowed him to kind of give his different reading, would have enriched the conversation, but because the group kind of shut it down and ignored him because he didn't have social power and he wasn't, always thought of as the intelligent one with the good comment or whatever, that he was limited in that way. So, that happens in the classroom, unfortunately, that's part of that social exploration that, and also I just kind of wanted to, so the last, she uses specifically literacy and social acts. So how do you see social acts informing literacy specifically in your classroom? Why not math? Why not science? What do you think? What is it about literacy that makes this a good subject to use it with? Okay, very subjective. It allows for multiple interpretations, right? Also think about how you usually teach literacy, right? It's usually in a way where it's very interactive, you know what I mean? It's not just math facts or whatever, it's talking about a book, right? And just because we're running out of time, I'll tell you, her major takeaway then was also that you interpreting a text is a social interaction, and you being in a group of people interpreting texts, the social context of how they're interpreting the text affects whether you get things in a certain way. Does that make sense? So if I'm in a group and I loved a book, but everybody in the group hated that book, then I might be less likely to speak out. You know what I mean? That interpretation of text is kind of a social thing. And in literacy especially, we make it into a social thing because collaboration and getting out ideas and all that and bouncing off is kind of naturally lends itself to this kind of pedagogy. So, okay. And this is just last thing, our little citation. If you have any lingering questions, we've kind of run out of time, but we'll be here at the end of class. And maybe just consider, if you see that this could be a way to guide your pedagogy. The book was really excellent, it was well written, and the sections are very obviously. So if you have a question about how I bring this into peer-led discussions, then there's a section specifically for you. So, any questions?
That would be fantastic.
We planned it, yes.
I'm glad, but I'm okay.
taking her class through kind of long-term inquiry to find answers.
Okay, so we have a video of kind of going into an inquiry. It's not from her class or anything, but it shows like you're talking about something else, and then a kid just asks a question or like makes a statement, and then it goes like launches into this whole inquiry with like the whole class getting involved. So we're gonna watch that, and we have a graphic organizer for you.
Yes, so to help you be an active learner, while you watch, if you would look at the organizer right in front of you, it has a space for you to jot down your words and actions that you notice, student words and actions, and then to reflect on what parts stood out to you. That part will be last. So if you could just jot down things that you notice students and the teacher does.
So like the first two columns you can think of as low inference notes, just simply what you see people say and do.
We're not gonna watch the whole thing, but it'll be like some important clips.
You need like a little audio plug. Yeah, you can use your headphones to your laptop in that port. There might be something in that Elmo or something. But I don't know.
Yeah, downtown.
Is that loud enough? You never do that?
put together to make it work odd, right? Here, odd. So you're kind of, I think, said then that he wasn't talking about every even number, right? You're saying that some of the even numbers, like 6, are made up of 2 odds, so you just suggested. Other people's comments? Which numbers are not on there?
2, 4, 6 can be added, or 8. I don't know how. Because there's 3 2s. There's 3 2s. There's 3 2s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Does everybody understand what he's trying to argue? He's saying 6 could be even or it could be odd. Well, watch the way he's going to prove it is.
Because see this, there's 2. 2 over here. Again here. And this here, there's 2, 2, and 2. And now to make 6. I know. Oh, you think I know what he's saying.
He's going to ask some questions.
I think what he is saying is that it's almost, I think what he's saying is that you have 3 groups of 2, and 3 is an odd number, so 6 can be an odd number and an even number.
Do other people agree with that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Do other people agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I disagree with that because it's not according to like, here, can I show you? It's not according to how many groups it is. Let's say that I will. If you call 6 an odd number, why don't you? Let's see. Let's say 10. 1, 2. And here are 10 circles. And then you would split them. Let's say I want you to split them by 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then why do you not call 10 like odd numbers? Other like numbers and odd numbers or and an even number. Yeah, but what about other numbers? Like if you keep on going on like that, and you say that all numbers are odd, then it would make sense that all numbers should.
Okay, so you actually are suggesting a definition, I think. Let's have everybody hear that one more time. Listen carefully. Proposing a definition for odd numbers. Can we listen to her one more time? Say again one more time what you say the definition is of an odd number.
Well, an odd number is something that when the bill is over.
After you do what?
After we settle the TV.
Any questions? Anyone, are you clear about what she's trying out? Just a second. Let's make sure people understand what she's suggesting. Who thinks they could come up and try a number on the board using her definition to test to see if it's even or odd? That would be a way of seeing if we understand what she's trying to say. Think you could try that? Watch and see if she's using the way you're thinking about it. What number are you going to experiment with? What would you predict 21? What would you think 21 should be? Okay, so if her method works, what will happen? Okay, everyone watch now and see if this experiment works out.
Yeah, you can target your tables, like what did you see students doing in this video? What did you see the teacher doing in this video? And
like what makes for a good inquiry? Like what do they do to make this work for the student? I love that.
So one of the things you might also look for like are word choices. Maybe even on the part of the teacher, like the way that she crafts her language and the choice words might help you.
Like, I didn't think of that. In a way that she says something that, like what a lot of times kids do is read, you can tell that they're
And that kind of goes back to something like power. Like, yeah, the teacher wasn't in power. They weren't looking to her for validation. They were looking to each other. And I think that's why, like, he didn't think I was like, that's why they were able to do this because they know they never wanted the teacher to say, like, are we right?
Yeah, but at the same time, she was there. Like, she
Right.
That's what I mean.
She had the pause. She also knew the words that she used. She didn't validate it. She didn't validate it. She just dropped it out. But I think it's super powerful. That's what the kid.
But when she saw they were on something, she definitely like they were waiting for that again. Yes.
One of my we were talking again about this student discussion and one essentially was that at the end of the session, the teacher should get perfect answers. So I'm curious if she did that or if she just come up with an answer and then even if there
I noticed that she didn't give them exact definition of oddness. She said, let's propose that we come up with it. And the kids also were very
This teacher in the video was a facilitator of good inquiry, and we would like to hear what do you think happened? Like, what were some teacher actions or student actions that contributed to this being the right kind of environment for discovery to happen? Yeah.
It seems obvious to me that the class already understood how this kind of classroom runs, and this would be a lesson that happened more towards like in the middle of the year when the kids have already established like how, because they all said prove to me, so it seems like she's created an environment where evidence
audience is really important, where like everybody's idea is heard, but then you really have to, show how you got there,
I know she clarified the students' comments if, they were articulating something in maybe not the most precise language. She says, well, it sounds like to me that, just clarifying it for the whole group. And, again, she facilitated when a girl mentioned a very key point. She's like, well, let's hear that again, I want to make sure everyone hears that. And, please do that.
I like that she framed it as an experiment. She was like, oh, we're going to try this experiment, because then it kind of formalized the process rather than kids just like throwing stuff on the board. It's like, oh no, this is an experiment. We're going to see if does this work, does this not work. And then that goes back to prove it, disprove it.
And I love that you said that, because that's one thing that Ballinger really discussed in her book, is the idea that like when you phrase it that way as an experiment, you're not saying something's right and something's wrong, you're saying like, let's figure it out together. So no one is looking to the teacher as a validator, like each other.
And in that vein, you're creating these moments where you can teach instead of just tell. With very, I think this is an example of how you can do it with math. And she talks about examples of how you can do it with science. But then you can do it also with other random comments that throughout this project we've been talking about bringing in examples from our own classrooms, where you could say that's not appropriate for school, or you could say we're not going to talk about that. Or you can take a step back and let it develop into a moment where a lot of learning is happening for all students.
And do you know how to switch this?
To the
HDMI? Like that? I turned this on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we tried to study. We tried to study what happened. We tried to study what happened in Cynthia Ballinger's classroom, like what did students do and what did teachers do and how did they travel through this long-term process of inquiry. We saw this in the video for like 6 minutes, but in her classroom, inquiry happened over a period of weeks, and they took this one question and then they went deeper and then they went deeper. So there's a map on your table. We tried to make the process visual. And so what's happening in your classroom all the time is this running log of questions or puzzling moments in your classroom. They're just like traveling. Kids say things all the time that maybe are, seen as not relevant or seen as off topic. And you can choose to let them run away, or you can choose to focus on them, right?
Like for example, one we talked about was like a student in my class over Halloween was asking us to what he was being for Halloween, and he was like, oh, I don't celebrate Halloween, we don't need to celebrate Halloween. And the teacher kind of just shut it down and shifted the conversation back to math, and then we were discussing how like that could have been a moment where we talked about like holidays and importance of family values and why some people practice certain things and some people don't, instead of it just being shut down and we're not talking about that.
She also mentioned like what's hidden in the quieter moments, or the moments where kids are turning and talking out of turn, taking the position of assumption that there is meaning there, and oftentimes you can find gems in those side conversations, and just to have an ear perked up to those, not just like the whole group talk.
So when you're listening, you can find seeds for lots of types of learning. And what she did is she would pay attention, she would listen in and grab one of those questions and stop to think about it. In this video, we saw the teacher like take that question and go with it in the moment, like let it play out. But in Ballinger's book, she also talks about this thing called stopping time, where you can take that, you can notice that question and save it for later and come back to it. But the teacher will think more about this question and bring it back to the class when they're ready. It could be immediately or it could be later. And the class goes through kind of a cycle of inquiry. So there's this new question, they study it just like they did in the video here, and then they find an unexpected result. Oh, 10 can also be an odd number? And then it evolves into a new question. Well, what about this, right? And then one of those findings might lead to a new question, so you go even deeper, you zoom in, and you follow that cycle of inquiry into deeper understanding. So what we saw today, like, could have continued over the next day to study the number 10 in greater detail. And over weeks, she also zooms out with her class and puts that new information into perspective and makes connections to the world. How does what we know inform the way we think about other ideas? And the last part of inquiry is to synthesize what you've learned from your discovery and share it. So like this finding and this question and this finding and this question led to this new discovery. And all of this is like led by student questions, like we saw in the video, and that's what makes it meaningful, right?
So now we kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to like reflect back on your experience in the classroom and your internships, and think about any puzzling moments that have come up. Even the things you hear on the subway in passing, like just anything that you thought about and were like, this could have been a teachable moment. So just like jot them down for a minute, and then you'll have time to talk it out with your table.
The first one, white girl, actually it's the same one as the girl that I used for her presentation. She wrote her beginning of how she went to protests. She didn't go to protests, she was going to the Florida hotel, she walked by the protests. First grade. She saw people with signs that said, I can't live. And she said, she knows that from what she saw on TV that people are protesting about this man who died because he was selling cigarettes. That cigarettes are bad and his leaves are white. I don't remember all of it. I wish I had it here. What? Interesting take. Yeah, really though. No. We always make the girls and so I would talk and she was listening to me. You know, I only heard about this entire week and now I decided to laugh. And then I went home and I cried. And we were kind of like, what I guess she does. And in fact, we do a lot of fun houses. Act like just as adults. We have whole thing. We're working a lot with kids. Our world. I know, no way we could have addressed it in that moment. We still have it, and I don't know how to talking about it, especially this particular hard with first graders, with just any child, and I just think how much of what she was writing is influenced by second grade versus just what a first grader interprets and believes and doesn't, Upper East Side. Yeah, but I mean, she's a wealthy wife. I mean, but even so, I mean, she has a good discipline. She's well educated. But anyway, so there's that. Today, one of my little girls, they're called Frightened, really into the book. So Pippa is really it's usually wish when I was born the homeless guys. The thing is that she spelled it in a way where I couldn't recognize the word, so I asked her, what are you frightened of? And she said, homeless guys, and I kind of was taken aback. And she thought I was taken aback, and she got bright red. And I said, okay, and I could see that she felt it, so I tried to make it okay, that's what you're frightened of, great, like, way to go, you were brave to say that. And I made these words, and I'm like, it's really scary to say what you're frightened of. But I don't leave it at that.
You did say something that called her, like, it's great to say what we're afraid of, because then it's at least say, like, it's calling attention to the fact that she did something.
she's saying? You know what I mean? Like, and what is it that she's saying? Is she saying that she doesn't like this? Or is she saying that because they are sometimes they're kind of scary looking to little kids? Right, and so, you know,
I'm coming out from a child.
that's what I mean. Yeah, but that's a really important thing. So part of me feels like we could have talked about that. Which is how it would be right. Right, so you don't want to
If you want to just bring it back for a quick minute. So now that you've kind of talked about like some of the puzzling moments that you had in your own class, I want you just to try and like hone in on maybe one of the ones that you talked about in your group and really try and like flesh out like what you would do with an inquiry. Like maybe if you didn't stop that as a puzzling like teachable moment, like what would you do now to like turn that into an inquiry?
So a good example is like just hearing like, oh, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Now that you've got 3 to 4 people around you, like sharing one moment maybe where you really don't know what you would do, and then brainstorming together ideas for that next step, whether it's in the moment or later in your time with your students. And then we'll come back and share.
Because that is something that she doesn't understand.
That's so
not
true.
every well, but there are some public schools where
Or even to what does it mean to be homeless?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that word? Yeah, because maybe she doesn't mean what. Maybe, you know, there's different ways you can be and look.
Again, I mean, credit wealthy world,
That's actually, that doesn't make sense. I don't know that those people, but it would be cool because if you were talking about a child doing this, like that's super relatable. It's just
yeah, that's what
My question was, is that because it was, so like in that video, for example, they were in a like, sharing, I mean, they're like this conversation, I don't know, like, when I saw that cast, and like, so like, it wouldn't be right, and to make it, definitely, like, she was on this light of his back, because clearly she's not near to me anyway, and then, but also, it's gonna be like, you would opportunity for maybe like find a book that has someone who's homeless and then go on. Right, so it's not directly on her, but she's still got the experience and she can still participate in the discussion or not kind of what you're doing, but you're opening it up if someone else. Because otherwise, in middle school, more of a struggle with not necessarily that you're not maybe that you want to decide that
We have
minute on wherever you have paper or a keyboard, and maybe write up either what or why is important. So why would following a puzzling moment into inquiry be important for students, for kids?
So about 30 more seconds for a phrase or a sentence.
So in the spirit of Maria and our time together, we're going to have a rendering. So read over the sentence that you just wrote and choose one word that you feel speaks to the heart of how you feel about the group or what you realized today.
And when you have, so when you have your word, we're thinking we'll just stand in a circle just so we don't have to move our chairs.
Just stand up and stand over.
Yeah, circle moment.
Anyone want to start? And I was like,
Explore, face, authentic, meaningful, peepers, lifelongers,
Validation.
authentic, everlasting, discovery, responsibility, value,
Empowerment.
safe, relevant, value.
Opportunity.
Yeah.